Hey, thanks for being here to check out this after the sermon clip. So today we talked about Titus chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, that the grace of God has appeared, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. And we talked about the effect of grace on the Christian's life, that the grace that saves you is the same grace that sanctifies you, that you will grow as a Christian the more you are exposed to, embrace, and live in light of God's grace. And what I want to help you understand, which I didn't talk about in the sermon, is that this is the consistent pattern of the Bible. In Genesis chapter 2, we hear about the garden, and we hear about the fruit, and we hear about all of the blessings that God gives. And then he says, do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We see it in Abraham, that God promises, I'll give you a great name, and your nation, you'll have a great nation, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. Then he talks to him about obedience. We see this in David, the promise that God makes to David in 2 Samuel chapter 7 and 1 Chronicles 17, that God just pours his grace onto David, and as a result of that, David responds in worship. David responds in obedience. That this is the way this is the pattern of the Bible. You see this in the Exodus. God rescues the slaves, and then he gives them his law. And so I want you to understand that that's the way it works. That cults and false religion, they're going to say it's the opposite, that God gives you the law and then he gives you grace as you keep the law, but that's not how this works. However, when grace has captured your heart, when grace has made an impact on your life, you want to please God. You want to follow him. You want to do what he says. And then what happens is that we often respond to that in ways that aren't helpful. So we'll respond by saying, well, I'm never going to be perfect, so it doesn't matter. That's why that word training is so important, that God's grace is training us to renounce and training us to live. Training means that we're never going to arrive. We're never going to get to the point where we've reached a level of growth and change and transformation to where it's like, I don't need the Spirit's work in my life. I don't need grace anymore. I'm good now. No, training means that we're always going to be on the treadmill of grace as we're constantly, forever, for as long as we live, being trained to be godly. And so I hope that's helpful for you. As I was just talking with somebody as they were leaving, they were talking about their husband who had just left her and their 3 kids, and heartbreaking. And at one point she said, he said to my kids, don't you kids want me to be happy? And that's the last thing that those kids would want. It's the last thing that God wants from us, for us. And he wants us to be holy. And how is it that we become holy? Holy just meaning separated from sin and devoted to God. How does that happen? It happens by the grace of God, by the Spirit of God at work in our lives. So I hope that you can see tangibly his work in your life, that he's training you to rid yourself of known sin, and he's training you to live a life that pleases him. If you do see that, then that's evidence of God's grace, and it's something to rejoice in, and it's something to tell other people about. Thanks for being here. See you next time.